Okay.
Recording. There we go.
Recording in progress.
There you go.
Okay. So, I guess, okay, everybody's here. Okay, well,
Yep,
we just start going? I mean, maybe for the folks for Maggie and Kate and Blake, we have weather here, which is not usually a thing that slows people down, but maybe it's our first, big storm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even, there's like 2 inches out there.
Oh my gosh.
Babies.
Yeah.
Snowed in. That's understandable. The first snow of the year always results in chaos, even if it's something that happens every year.
Yeah, for us, we hear about that in other places. For us, it's no big deal. Unless you get, onto 4 or 5 feet, then it's a problem. But okay, well, let's call the meeting to order. So for roll call, let's just let the meeting minutes reflect that we have our entire board here, with the exception of Marcy Dye and Jeremy Battles and Joanne here. So
She's online.
She's online.
Oh, Joanne's there. Okay, great. Awesome. So then everybody's here except Jeremy and
Marcy.
and Marcy's supposed to be coming.
Late, right?
Yep. Okay, so then really the only thing that we have on the agenda tonight is a presentation by Kansas State University Technical Assistant Brownfield, and they're going to share with us their brownfield inventory and prioritization. And I guess I'll just turn it over to them.
Great. Thank you all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I had a little PDF malfunction here, so just give me a second.
Kate, you want me to share?
Nope, we're good. I just was having a weird issue where it was full screen, but it was like rolling in between each of the pages. So it was not really in presentation mode. Okay, but this seems like it's working. Okay, well, thank you all for joining today. Is it just pretty much the Red Lodge URA there in the room, or do we have members of the City Council and the Planning Commission as well?
Yes, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Jody Ronning, Ward 3 Rep and City Council President.
I am Chelsea Tupin, Ward 1 representative for City Council as well as Planning Board. So double whammy.
I know.
Yeah. My name is Patty Davis, and I'm with Ward 1 City Council Rep as well. Thank you.
So we have, but I think people regularly watch the recording, so we don't have a big crowd tonight, but we appreciate you being here. And
Might also mention there's 3 of us from the planning board.
Yeah.
Okay, did you hear that? There's 3 from the planning board here.
And Jerry Patton is our contract planner. He's also on mine.
Okay, there you go. I did not know that. So we have our contract planner, because we don't have a employee anymore. We have a contract planner situation.
Well, great. Okay, then I will. I wasn't sure if it was necessary to do introductions, but we can plan on doing that. Can you guys see my screen okay? Looks like yes.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm Kate Lucas. I'm here with Kansas State University's Technical Assistance to Brownfields program. For short, we call it KSU TAB. We are an EPA-funded organization that provides free services to communities like Red Lodge to help them figure out how to clean up and redevelop their sites with potential for contamination. So we do a lot of very wide range of services. We provide planning assistance, economic development assistance, and I think you'll get a good feel for the type of services we provide after our presentation today. We are the provider in EPA Region 8, which is where Montana is located. Despite Kansas being in our name, we are the service provider for all of EPA Region 8 and the rest of the Mountain West. I'm joined today by Maggie Bellinger and Blake Bellinger. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Blake, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm Blake Bellinger. I'm an associate professor of landscape architecture and urban design at Kansas State University. I'm a licensed landscape architect, and I've been working. I worked both professionally and in academia, and I've been working with TAB now for about 10 years, working specifically focusing on brownfield projects, both as a consultant and with my students.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Maggie Bellinger. I am the Senior Director here for the KSU TAB program. I've been in the brownfields game for a little over 20 years, and I've been with TAB for a little over 8 years.
Okay, so we were asked by Beartooth RC&D to come to Red Lodge and do some work on the urban renewal area. I think I might have heard Myrna's voice there in the room, but I'm not sure. They're a great regional organization, and they have some wonderful brownfield resources as well. Okay, so just to make sure we're all on the same page, a lot of times I start this type of presentation, I introduce ourselves as KSU TAB, and people say, that's great, what's a brownfield? Because it's something that can be a little bit ambiguous. A brownfield is any property where there is either a real or perceived risk of contamination. And so that's any site that maybe had an industrial or commercial use there in the past. There's a potential risk for things like asbestos, lead paint. So it's really not necessarily even a super scary, big environmental issue. It can be kind of these smaller, maybe a petroleum spill from an auto body shop, or just, again, asbestos or lead paint from some historic buildings. Those all qualify a project or a property for brownfields funding and for resources like KSU TAB and grant resources. So it's not a scary word. It's a word that really means there's potential for redevelopment and revitalization. Okay, so just for the folks in the room or who are watching the recording who are not familiar with the project, we were asked, and I'll get into our scope of work here in a second, we were asked to come and do some reuse visioning for the North Community Entrance Urban Renewal District, which was established a few years ago. It's 160 acres on the north end of Red Lodge. I'm sure you're all familiar. That is, so this area was really identified as a focus area for the Urban Renewal District because it's a little bit underdeveloped, a little underutilized. There's a lot of businesses there that don't really provide a attractive and welcoming entrance to Red Lodge. And so the intent is to spruce it up a little bit and encourage redevelopment where feasible. The 4 primary goals of the NCE URD, or I think we kind of call it the URD kind of casually, we may call it that throughout this presentation. But the 4 primary goals are to increase housing units near downtown, support business development, improve public infrastructure, and promote historic preservation and cohesive urban design identity. Okay, so that's where we're working. Our scope of work is outlined here. So we started out with some pretty robust community engagement, and I'll get into the results of that in a minute. We started out with an online survey that we published before we came and visited Red Lodge at the end of May.
See the slides?
Oh, can you guys?
You don't see the slides? No.
Is there anybody having issues?
Looks like
We see.
Susan Boise could be muted. They're muted. Got it.
Okay. All right. Can everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so we came and did a site visit in Red Lodge at the end of May 2025. And we followed that up with what we called the Needs and Aspirations Survey. And then we talked about doing some feedback on visioning. So far, we've not requested community-wide feedback in the form of a survey yet, but that is an option for us to do after we kind of did this presentation here for City Council and the Planning Commission. And the URA. So in addition to the community engagement, we also created a brownfields inventory and a site prioritization worksheet. And then Blake and a couple of his students worked on a package of redevelopment renderings that show potential for what could be developed within the URD. And he's going to go over those here in a minute. And we also prepared a resource roadmap that identified different grant funding resources to help achieve the vision. Okay, so just for folks, I know for the URA folks, this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, but for folks who have not had a chance to review any of our deliverables to the state, I'm going to give a quick overview. So the first community engagement activity that we did was that baseline survey that was issued in April or May of 2025. And the purpose of this was really to help us get a feel for how the community perceives and uses the URD. And how it could maybe better suit their needs in the future. So we had folks review the goals that were those 4 primary goals that were established with the URD. So we had them rank them. People were very supportive of improving public infrastructure and increasing housing units downtown. This is clearly an area that the community uses a lot, either as passing through or visiting the businesses there. The school is technically within the URD, which is not necessarily, that's not up for redevelopment, but, that does give a lot of people reason to visit on a regular basis. And what was really notable here is that 89% of respondents agreed that it was either important or very important for this northern entrance to the community to reflect the unique character and heritage of Red Lodge, which they did not currently feel that it was doing. So we put together these word clouds. One of the questions was, in a few words, describe, how you perceive the URD as it is currently. And you can see, the most commonly used words here are underutilized, ugly, unattractive, rundown, eyesore, hodgepodge, commercial, underdeveloped, just undeveloped, underdeveloped, disconnected, needs improvement, just all of these kind of negative attributes. And then we asked them to provide a few words of how they imagine this urban renewal district in the future. And you see the most commonly used words here are housing, inviting, welcoming, business, pedestrian, entrance, downtown, walkable, friendly, community, things that are much more positive, and I think are much more reflective of the character of Red Lodge. I think we, in our visit, really felt that it's a very special place, but currently that northern entrance just doesn't really do justice to the rest of Red Lodge. So when we came at the end of May, the first community engagement event that we held was a community meeting. That was the evening of May 28th. And we did an overview of the area. We actually talked a little bit about the Pea Cannery project and just did a little bit of background. And then we launched into the real meat of the meeting, which involved 3 exercises. The first of which we had participants take some cards with images on them and select a card. We did this 3 times. The first time they selected a card based that they thought kind of reflected the current identity of the URD. The second round, they selected a card that they felt identified the obstacles preventing the URD from being, all of those, that second tier of words, welcoming, attractive, inviting. And then we had them pick a card, an image that reflected their vision of what they thought the future or the potential identity of that district could be. So that was really fun. I think we had some people getting really creative. I think it was a good energy creator. For the second exercise, we did a theming exercise where we had participants brainstorm improvements, things that need to happen within the URD in order to, again, achieve that second tier of words. And then we had participants group those by theme. So there were people who were talking about connectivity and sidewalks and multimodal, bike infrastructure. And so those all kind of are grouped in the same category. So we had people organize things and group ideas so that we had some general buckets of ideas. we took those buckets and for the third exercise had people vote. And that really helped us understand what the primary priority is for improvements within the URD. And all of that is based around the North Star question, as we framed it in the meeting, which is, what kind of place do you want the NCE URD to become? How do you envision it serving both the everyday needs of residents and the long-term health of the community? So the results of that meeting were very consistent with what we had received, the feedback we received in the initial baseline survey. Basically, that the current character of the district doesn't reflect Red Lodge's character, and that there was a need for it to be more consistent with the rest of Red Lodge. And so they identified, these are the 5 kind of themes that we identified in that meeting, and these are ranked in order of the votes that they received. I will say, so 1 through 3, provide a welcoming and attractive entrance, increase green space and landscaping, and provide mixed-use development, including commercial uses and attainable housing for all ages. Those 3 received, it was like 100, 95, and 90 votes. So they were pretty equally supported. The other 2 were slightly, they were still definitely priorities, but I think people generally were really, really supportive of those first 3, especially. Okay, so that was the community meeting. The next day, we had 2 informal meetings. One in the morning at one of the cafes in downtown Red Lodge. And that was really just an informal conversation with stakeholders and residents who were able to attend. And the reason that we did the community engagement like this is we wanted folks to be able to attend, people who couldn't attend the evening meeting to be able to attend either the morning meeting of the following day or potentially the afternoon happy hour that we did. And all of these, again, focus on just kind of trying to capture a diverse set of voices within Red Lodge. So to further that goal, we also held a visioning session with a few students from Red Lodge High School. And we did some very creative collaging where we took existing images of some of the sites within the URD and had the students take pictures from magazines and kind of create their vision for these sites. And it was really fun to learn about their priorities, which I think they were very aware, very plugged in. They knew a lot about the community. They were well-spoken, but they also talked a lot about the need for more youth recreation opportunities. And so, in order to reflect that input, we added a 6th priority to this previous one. You've got 5 priorities here. We added a 6th priority of create welcoming places for community youth to gather and recreate. So again, to capture any input that was not able, or from people who were not able to attend previous meetings, we issued the needs and aspirations survey. And the purpose of this survey was really structured to ask very similar questions that we did in the community engagement meeting. So it was a little bit repetitive for folks who had attended in-person meetings. But again, we're trying to cast a wide net. The thing that was pretty remarkable here, and not really remarkable, but it was encouraging to see that the people who were providing input online were very consistent with the input that was being provided by the in-person participants. So clearly there's a lot of community consensus around the need for a little bit of revitalization in this area, particularly when it comes to open space and housing. Oh no.
My screen.
Could be worse.
Did that go black? Yeah. I might have to.
It does.
Kate, I can take over.
And you're, I've got to back up. I don't know what's wrong with my PowerPoint. If you enter into read mode and you try to exit out of it, it doesn't like it. So we're good. All right, yes, this is basically what I just finished saying. People are very much in consensus. Housing, landscape, and recreational opportunities were really highly prioritized by both online and in-person participants. Okay, so in addition to the community engagement, while we were in Red Lodge for our site visit, we also conducted a brownfields inventory where we went around, walked the entire URD and identified sites that are potentially have some contamination risk, are potentially in need of redevelopment or underutilized, and created a inventory within our KSU tab has a tool called the Brownfields Inventory tool. So we created the inventory within that tool. I think Maggie's just putting the finishing touches on that. And we can plan to do a demo for the URA or potentially one or two people who would be comfortable managing that going forward. And that can really help you just keep track of these projects from, the initial exploration phase to the complete redevelopment phase. And in addition to the inventory, we just wrapped up the prioritization spreadsheet. This is something, it's available in the OneDrive link that I sent out earlier today to the URA folks. I'm happy to share that again. And let me know if you have any issues accessing it. But this is a tool that can be used by the URA to really figure out which of these sites are best suited or the highest priority for redevelopment. And it's customizable, and you can see here, Maggie put together just a sample, but you can see here theoretically, and I think in practice, you will see that there are certain sites that end up with higher scores, which would generally indicate that it is a site that is more ripe for redevelopment, and could be pursued first. Okay, and the good news is I'm passing it over to Blake. The bad news is that my Adobe is also not working, so I'm just going to stop sharing. And Blake, let you take over.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Everybody see that okay? Thumbs up? Yeah. Okay.
Looks good to me.
Awesome. Okay, so from
Pretty small.
what's that? Is it not filling the
Pretty
screen?
small. Can you zoom in on your end?
I can go full screen. These slides or these images here are, whoa. You guys just lose it?
Yeah, we don't see it anymore.
Yeah, that's because I went full screen.
Yeah. The price.
Yeah. Well, these images are really intended not to be in detail. Let me stop sharing. It did. Let me try again. On this slide, these images are just examples of some images that we presented. Is it better? No, same. Okay. Well, they're not necessarily intended to be read.
Can you hide the attendees on the top?
Oh, you can see that? Weird. Okay.
So we're looking at, it says mapping in conditions. It's kind of like 6 really tiny little images. Is that what you want to be sharing?
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, there's a series of maps. These are maps that we shared with the URA in July. And this was part of our process for identifying some of the critical conditions for prioritizing sites to do some visioning on. So for our visioning contribution for our technical expertise, we weren't going to, or we're not able to, due to the funding constraints of EPA, do an entire district plan. So one of the goals was to focus in and identify a few demonstration sites where we could do some visioning that could help the community continue the dialogue about what can be possible on these types of brownfield sites. So we looked at things like the topography, risk of flood, trails, sidewalk continuity, vegetation, and impervious surface, as well as land use and ownership. From there, we identified with the URA areas that were the highest priority for redevelopment and other areas that were high potential for redevelopment. And the criteria we used for that selection was city-owned property, so areas that parcels that are already owned by the city, abandoned, vacant, or underused sites, industrial land uses, or parcels that are incongruent with the URD vision. And so we settled on actually 3 sites, 3 areas, the green areas as well as the blue. And from that, we moved into a slightly more nuanced site areas where we have 2 focus sites, the north site and the south site. In this presentation, I'm going to start with the south site. It's less complicated and more straightforward. And then I'll go through the north site where there are 3 different options, and it's a more complicated set of conditions. Throughout this presentation, there's a kind of dynamic that I'd like you to all keep in mind. When approaching urban design, it's important to begin with the concept of placemaking, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's basically a people-centered approach to urban design. And then in terms of the spatial dynamics of a site, there are 3 main components that need to be balanced. Density, or amount of building space, number of housing units, just the amount of development that you're proposing. Civic space or green space, and then the circulation and parking that's required to support those uses. And as one of those circles gets bigger, as you pick up more density, you need to have more parking, and those 2 conditions combined will shrink the green space. If you want to increase the green space, then you have to shrink the parking, and that might affect how much density you can have. So at all times, when considering these 3 options, we were thinking about the dynamics of these 3 spatial considerations. As long as I'm on this slide, there are a couple disclosures that I just want to share. One is that these are concepts, and there are 3 concepts out of potentially thousands of ways of approaching redevelopment on these sites. And also that this was assembled without survey data. So we were using mapping data that's reliable, but not as precise as you would get if you did an actual field survey. Also, this plan is nothing that is meant to be a binding legal document or anything like that. It's not part of the planning documents for the city of Red Lodge. These are just ideas. These are just visions. These are intended to continue the dialogue and help continue the prioritization of how to redevelop these sites. And so, whoops, didn't mean to move that one up. So with all that in mind, placemaking strategies in Red Lodge, it's like I said, it's a people-centered approach to designing public space that really focuses on human comfort, sociability, creating vibrant places that are accessible to people. It recognizes that the public realm or civic space is kind of the heart of communities, the hearts of neighborhoods. And when I say public realm, I'm including things like streets, parks, plazas, squares, any place that's owned by the public where people can interact freely, where people can go about their day. And so there has been a focus on that in all of these concepts, that these are not just concepts that are trying to maximize all of the development potential, but there's a consideration, there's a balance, there's density, but there's always going to be some consideration of the public realm and placemaking in this. And some of the opportunities for placemaking that we identified, you can see on this slide. We thought the concrete batch plant tower was a very interesting structure that could potentially be maybe reused as some kind of a iconic feature or sculpture somewhere. We noticed that when you're driving from the north into town, there's this really amazing view of Mount Maurice, that if buildings were on either side of Broadway, you'd be able to frame that view, and it could create this really memorable entry experience for people. Creating vibrant streets is an important part of placemaking. So putting active uses at the ground floor of streets, just like your Main Street has, with businesses that people want to visit, and there's people moving around and crossing paths and talking. That's a critical strategy for placemaking. Place-based public art is another important aspect. You can see here your very own Roxy Payne sculpture being displayed in New York City. So integrating public art into public spaces is a really great way to create memorable and iconic places. Looking inward for inspiration as well. So, what's happening with the Pea Cannery right now, the renovation that's occurring and all the excitement and energy that's going on around that. As well as just thinking about people, making programming for people so that there are activities like farmers markets and other things to do in town that attract people. And then placemaking also is very successful when you can gain quick wins through temporary installations. So you can have events with just temporary pop-up tents, or you can put paint on the street or paint on the ground to start to mark out where different activities will occur. And that really generates a lot of momentum and gets people excited and interested. So I'm going to start with the south site. So you can see we're at the corner of 2nd and Broadway, and it's currently the site of a vacant house, an empty field with a shed. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with where we are here. And because of the size limitations of the site, I'll go back to this slide real quick. This area here has been identified as a likely location for a fire station expansion. So we didn't touch that. Aside from showing the approximate size of a building that could fit in there. So we focused on this northern piece of the south site. And because of the constraints of the size, it made the most sense to really focus on the housing need that the community has expressed. And we're proposing alley-loaded row houses. So row houses are single family homes that are attached at the wall. So each unit is owned by a single household. And in this case, they face onto the street and their garages are in the back. So in this image down here in the lower right, you can see that each unit has its own garage. Cars drive in, park in the garage, and that keeps driveways off the street. So there's not a driveway interrupting the sidewalk, and it creates a little bit more pedestrian friendly environment. And it's also very convenient for the homeowners. There's a second alternative to this, and that is the first concept. This is a lower density concept. It has 8 row homes. They are facing onto Broadway Avenue behind that existing grove of aspens. Those trees are in the right of way of Broadway, and so they can't be touched, which we think is actually a great thing because it creates a buffer between those housing units and the street. And then immediately behind the row houses, there's a small backyard, and behind the backyard, there's a garage, a detached garage. And the way that people will be able to park in these garages is they drive down this existing alley here. So you can see the existing housing of the community immediately to the west. Vehicles can just drive down that existing alley and then park in the garage. They could walk through their little backyard and then be in their home. And so the key advantages of this really are if the community wants to create opportunities for families to buy units that have a small backyard, this is a really great option for that. It's 8 units. The second option is a little more than twice that number. It's 18 units. And the way this one works, it has row houses in the same location, but instead of a little backyard, there is a new alley that's proposed immediately behind those. And from here, vehicles can drive and park in the back of either of these 2 rows of row homes. These row homes would look onto that existing alley or that existing little street that the existing housing across the street is sitting on. So these folks would be looking at this housing, and these folks would be looking at the Aspens and Broadway Avenue. This one would be really great for the community if the number of units is more important. So this one offers 18 single-family attached units. So that's it for the south site. Really 2 options: an 8-unit with small backyards, or an 18-unit with tuck under garage parking. So now I'm going to jump up to the north site, and the north site is really comprised of 2 pieces, on the west side of Broadway and the east side of Broadway. And so you all know this area pretty well, the liquid propane storage area, the salvage yard, the concrete batch plant, and some other low density land uses. And in order to kind of explain where these designs came from, it's important to describe the analysis we did, the urban design analysis of this area. So one of the first things that we always look at when we're doing urban design projects is the existing street and block structure. And so what we found in this area is that there are some very long stretches of street and going north-south and going east-west, the grid is very fragmented. And so you can see the proposal for all three concepts introduces new streets here. So an east-west street in this location, east-west street in this location that then continues down to Hagen. So this one is Coates to Broadway, Coates to Broadway, and then Broadway to Hagen. And then we also are proposing pedestrian crosswalks at each of those locations, recognizing that this is a state street and you'd have to deal with the DOT and that can sometimes be challenging. We do think it's appropriate in this location to try for that. And it certainly addresses the desires of the community for walkability and connectivity, as well as trying to extend that feeling of downtown into the north area. And speaking of that, a related concern is that these blocks, when you look at the size of the blocks, are very large. And large blocks are not as walkable, they're not as comfortable for pedestrians, and they don't create as a amenable environment. And so by adding these streets, we actually decrease the size of these blocks, the existing blocks are about 3 times the size of what you have downtown now. And so by decreasing their size, they're more consistent with the urban fabric that the community has expressed that they prefer. The strategies that we're using are aligned with the placemaking approach to urban design, which is to place mixed-use buildings along Broadway. So a mixed-use building is a building that has activated storefronts at the ground level. So shops, offices, retail of other kind, restaurants, cafes, facing onto Broadway, and then 2 stories of residential above that. And so that's the red color here. And then the yellow color is completely residential use. And so the residential uses would be pushed away from Broadway, where it's on the quieter residential streets. And then another important strategy is to hide the parking behind the buildings. So the parking lots won't be visible from Broadway as much as possible. There are some, in some of the side streets, there is some visibility of the parking lot. Certainly, it's kind of with the size of these parcels, it's impossible to completely wrap it. So the main idea here is putting mixed use, vibrant activities right on Broadway to activate that street, put residential on the side streets, and then parking in the middle. And I just want to point out on these little diagrams, these are not exactly the concepts. These are just strategic approaches. It's a way of, diagrammatically showing the ideas. And then another big move that was really important that came through loud and clear in the community engagement surveys and the meetings was the importance of having green space in this redevelopment. So looking at what's existing there along Coates, there's this kind of forested slope, this greenway, and the Coal Miners Park is over here on the east side of our focus area. And so we thought it'd be really important to have some kind of a green system that connects those two together. And depending on the strategy you'll see out of the 3 design concepts, some of them are pure greenways and some are a mix of greenway and sidewalk along a street. I'll get into that in more detail when I go through the concepts, but then all the concepts also have some kind of park or a combination of parks and plazas, some kind of civic space in both the west block and the east block. And then lastly, all of the streets in this proposal are intended to be safe and comfortable pedestrian streets. Safe meaning they all have sidewalks, and comfortable meaning they have shade, they're easy to get around, they have trees, tree canopy. Okay, so with all of that in mind, we produced a series of kind of character images of what Broadway could look like with that mixed use building character. So up here in the upper left corner, you can see the existing view. This is at Broadway Avenue and Beartooth Lane, looking south toward Mount Maurice. And then these are a variety of different character images that show what it could look like with that redevelopment. And the architectural styles are really less important here than kind of the scale and the massing of the building. Some of the buildings in these images are shown at 4 stories, but the community has expressed that 3 stories is the maximum that you would want to go to. So please take these with kind of a grain of salt. They're really shown to they're here to demonstrate how does it look when there's shops and storefronts on the ground floor. How does this set up a view to Mount Maurice, and then kind of what are some basic feel. What is the basic feel that you could have along that stretch? We also pulled together some character images of the types of architecture or the types of buildings the community would like to see. This is based on feedback from a few weeks ago. And these are what an apartment building could look like. And again, there's no mandate to stay with any of these, but just kind of a sense of feeling. So when you're looking at the plan views, when I show the plan views in just a second, you have kind of an image in mind of the types of structures that we are imagining. We also have some character images for what parks and greenways and green infrastructure could look like. So these are character images of parks with apartment buildings on the edges, with different types of public artwork and sculptures displayed. And these bottom 2 at the left are greenway trails, also showing the kind of a character and how public art can be included. And this image in the lower right, that is an example of a green infrastructure strategy that can be used in parking lots. So when the rain falls, it's collected in a rain garden or another type of bioswale. And so the water is cleaned and slowed down before it's released into the natural waterways. Okay, so this brings us to our first concept. Concept 1. We're calling it Coates Park, and that is because the name of the park, we named the park after the avenue immediately to the west. And in this concept, there are mixed-use buildings on both sides of Broadway. Both of them have an activated storefront at ground level and 2 stories of residential on top. On the west side, the building has a small plaza adjacent to it that could serve the businesses that are there, as well as the residents of the building, maybe some outdoor seating, maybe a water feature, other kinds of human scale elements, a surface parking lot for cars, and then the park, which has townhouse or the row houses immediately adjacent to it. And these row houses face onto the park. So the front door of the park, the front door of the row houses looks out onto this park. So there'd be maybe a little porch and then eyes on the public space. And so that creates a sense of safety. There's a longstanding theory in planning that when you have eyes on the street or eyes on the park, meaning buildings are looking onto those civic spaces, they're safer. So behind those row houses is an alley and then another row of row houses. And so you can see that these are all garage tuck under parking for these row houses. And then skipping across Broadway, there's a parking lot here that would serve both the residents and the retail businesses. There is a space for green infrastructure to treat stormwater, and then 16 row houses that are garage loaded off of this aisle of the parking lot. Then across Hagen is 9 more row houses. And so along Hagen, you get this kind of neighborhood feel of single family residences facing each other along the street. So this of the 3 concepts is the best for single family attached housing. And it's also the best for retail areas. So it has the most row houses of all the concepts. It has the lowest overall housing of all the concepts as well. So in this little chart down here, this bar chart, you can see that there are 99 total units for this concept, and 43 of those are row houses. And 56 are apartments. So there's a pretty good balance, about half and half between row houses and apartments. And so the other big advantage of this is it has a lot of retail space. So both sides of Broadway have retail, and it edges out concept 3 by just a little bit. but again, it has the fewest number of apartments overall, and it has a relatively low, actually it's tied for last with the least amount of green space area. And you can see in terms of the greenway down here on the west side, it would be essentially a sidewalk, a tree-lined sidewalk that pedestrians would walk along. And then that would transition into a dedicated linear park, like a greenway through this stretch. So concept 2, Broadway Park, features a public park right on Broadway Avenue. So as people drive in from the north, one of their first entry experiences will be this iconic park. And this could be a place where the public art is displayed, where there are places for people to be active, and there could be picnicking and pavilions and food trucks and all kinds of activities here. This aligns with the, especially, I mean, all three of them do, but I'd say this one in particular aligns with the high school need for places to recreate and gather. And so behind Broadway Park is a 3-story apartment building. There's no retail on the west side of this concept. And at the ground floor of this apartment building would be small patios for the residents who live at ground floor to be able to open up right onto the park. Again, creating a very pleasant interaction between the residences and the park, and also increasing safety. And then behind the apartments is a surface parking lot for the residents. There's also a small plaza adjacent to the building that would serve residents with outdoor eating areas and shade. Then across Broadway, across Broadway is the same exact concept as concept 1. So mixed use building with active storefronts on the first floor, residents on floors 2 and 3, row houses, and then more row houses. So this concept has the best balance of housing with green space. So it has the most green space of all 3 concepts by double. So it has 2 times the amount of green space. It also has the best connectivity with the greenway system. So in this concept, the greenway goes all the way from Coates to Hagen, and it also is connected with Broadway Park. So the greenway, the trail system actually connects directly, physically with the park. The downside of this one, it is the worst for retail. It has the least amount of retail square footage of all 3 concepts. And one potential disadvantage is that Broadway Park is adjacent to Broadway, which is at times a high volume street. So you would have to be designed in a way to make sure that kids aren't able to get too close to the street. With this design in place, traffic calming measures would be there. So cars would be going a lot slower than they are now, but still there's a fairly high volume. And then a potential disadvantage is that Broadway is only activated with retail on one side, on the west side, this pink area. But overall, this concept aligns best with what the feedback or the input we received from the community was, welcoming entrance, a mix of uses with housing, green space, and connectivity and trails. And the third concept, this one is really is the highest density. It has the most units. And so it is mixed use along Broadway. And then it's apartments in the east-west wings of the building. So apartments go all the way to the ground floor on the east-west wings, and then the north-south wings on both sides are mixed use. And then the large parking lots serve the buildings. They're pretty well hidden from Broadway. This one is visible from that proposed street, but it's adjacent to another parking lot. The parks in this concept are smaller than the other concept. Additively, they're about the same as the first one, but they're kind of broken into 2 small ones. This one we're calling Courtyard Park. It's a small public park that's kind of hugged by the building here. And then there's also a small triangle park up in on the east side, just kind of south of the north wing. And then across Hagen, there are 10 row houses that face on to Hagen again. So the key advantage of this one is it's the highest number of units. It's 144 total units versus 117 or 99. And if apartments are important, it has the highest number of apartments as well, 134 apartments and only 10 row houses. So apartments can be beneficial if affordability is a high priority. So if the community is looking for ways to integrate affordable housing in with market rate housing, this option could be pretty attractive just based on the pure number of apartments. Also, from a retail standpoint, it has the second most amount of retail space, and it's second by just a slim margin. It's almost the same amount as the first concept. Some disadvantages of this one are it has by far the fewest number of single-family row houses. It has the least amount of green space and public plazas. And the parks here are both pretty small. You can see Courtyard Park and Triangle Park are pretty small, and they're kind of tucked up against the buildings. So we anticipate that those would be heavily used by the apartment residents and maybe not quite so much by the general public, even though they could be public parks. They're just kind of the way they're tucked away and so close to these apartments, they may see maybe a little bit less of the public visitation. Also, these both have, of the three concepts, the largest areas of uninterrupted surface parking, and that was just in order to get enough parking stalls to serve the number of residents. So here is a breakdown of all the metrics that I ran on the three concepts. You can see a comparison of all the residential units. The density tracks along that. So we go from lowest densities is concept 1, the highest density is concept 3, with 17 dwelling units per acre in concept 3 and 12 dwelling units per acre in concept 1. And then concept 2 is in the middle at 14 dwelling units per acre. Green space, you can see Broadway Park is double the amount of green space from concept 1 and 2. In terms of retail square footage, 1 and 3 are basically the same, and concept 2 is about a third less of those. Floor area ratio is fairly consistent. This is more of a planning and development metric. But you can see that the Broadway Park has the lowest floor area ratio. This just compares the overall amount of interior floor space to the overall area of the site. And then lastly, the number of parking stalls is lowest on concept 2 as well. And the reason for this is that because there's so much less retail, so there's not as much demand for parking to cover that retail need. And then comparing the land cover of the three concepts, concepts 1 and 3 are somewhat similar. I think the big wedge to look at here, the big piece of the pie, is Broadway Park. Again, has about double the green space. And concept 3 has the most coverage of buildings of the three concepts. So we are presenting these three different visions of possible development scenarios to you guys as a way for you to continue the dialogue, to think about the trade-offs between how you want to approach this development in this area, and really think about what's most important as you continue to prioritize and think about the future of the North Entry District. Kate, yeah.
Thanks, Blake. I only have a couple slides, so if you're okay with continuing to present, that might be easiest.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, that was a great overview. So switching gears into an overview of our final deliverable for this project, which is what we're calling the resource roadmap. And this is a document that helps to outline the development process and identify sources of funding that can be used to achieve the vision established by the community. So we identified 8 different categories of funding need that were more or less related to those 6 priorities for redevelopment of this area. And identified over 50 different funding sources that can be used to implement the vision. And we also provided a selection of those that we thought would just be best suited to your project and to your community, and provided a draft funding strategy that provides a brief overview of those resources and how they can be used. Next one. Okay, so our next steps, we can schedule a brownfields inventory tool to demo the tool for you guys so you have an understanding of how it works and you feel comfortable taking it on and managing it on your own. Of course, we're always here as a resource to help you manage that process, but we want you to be able to use this as much as you need to. You can take a look at that site prioritization worksheet and really use that to help maybe choose between a couple different sites and pick the one that you'll decide to tackle first. In our original scope of work, we did discuss, we had accounted for a final survey that involved publishing the draft redevelopment renderings that Blake just demoed, and providing a survey that people could provide feedback on those concept plans, and just let us know their thoughts. I am not sure exactly, things kind of change from when we initially draft these scopes of work. We're happy to still provide support on issuing that. I can't exactly remember where we landed, so we can kind of keep the conversation open on that item. So then a few kind of steps post KSU tab support, tasks that will actually kind of advance you towards redevelopment. I know you're working on some of these already, but just conversations with property owners about either acquisition or land swaps, whether that's the city or the city acquiring the property or a nonprofit acquiring property, or just acting kind of as an intermediary to connect existing private property owners with potential developers. That's an option. Second one, conducting environmental site assessments. This is an area that has quite a lot of light to medium industrial activity, and it's likely that there will be some amount of contamination that is present on these sites. And so characterizing that potential contamination and figuring out a plan for how to address it is going to be step one of the redevelopment process. And then kind of as those steps unfold for your priority site or sites, beginning to pursue grant funding for all of the steps of the redevelopment process, and finally ending with issuing RFPs for development partners or potentially listing these sites for sale. So our last slide here is just our contact information. I know that the URA knows how to get hold of us, but we're happy to field any questions that folks have a conversation. We're available. So we've been talking for, I think, a solid hour now, almost. Do we have questions, comments from the audience?
Anybody have questions, comments?
I think the only question that I kind of had is that we always have to think about when the snow is scraped from these parking lots, that there has to be a place to put the snow.
Where it goes.
And so, and when it melts, it doesn't create ponds unless we wanted it. It was designed for that. So I didn't see any consideration for snow storage.
Just have to pull it off.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
There was not designated areas for snow storage in the concepts. Certainly the projects or the parking lots that have the green infrastructure, the extra wide island, that would be a place for snow storage. But that would have to be something in the next step that would be considered, in more depth when when it was taken to the next level. Yeah.
So yeah, I think my question would be for the URA, for the URD, specifically after getting this information, how does this create your concepts for how you want to see the city and zoning, as well as our planning department, change things to move forward to either adapt to this, take pieces of these concepts and put those infrastructures in place to encourage that? Or is it something that you want this to be more of an actual visual goal, that this is something that we're trying to obtain? Because that, to me, is, we have this beautiful vision over here and where we are now, and there's a lot of in-between that would love some direction and answers for, and we're in a really good position to build that. But I think coming from your guys' perspective, as you've been in the weeds of this for so long, that could be super beneficial as like some sort of recommendations, whether it's something for, again, I hate to make more master plans because we have so many, but realistically, some sort of vision document would be really helpful, something that could be a guiding source of something that's updated every couple of years. And I'm not sure if that's something that we kind of have or something that's been thought of. But, I mean, when we go through zoning, we're looking at growth policy, we're looking at the downtown master plan. It's something that we use on council level to reflect back to when making decisions. So I think having something that takes these concepts and makes them a goal, or that northern star, I really like that concept, to where if you can make that something like, this is how we're always going to try and shift our decisions. So that wasn't a question. That was just a lot of rambling.
Well, it seems to me that all of this is dependent on funding too, like, and so none of us are grant writers on the URA, so, hopefully we have the Beartooth RTD and people of the city to work on that. And also, we have not had developers knocking down our door to do any of this work. So we're not going to probably go out and do a lot of this.
And again, I imagine a lot of this is private land, as mentioned, like there would be land swaps, acquisitions, those types of things. Is that even something that the city wants to consider at this point in time? Or is it something we would rather take these ideals and pivot? I love the idea of using funding for recognizing and maybe mitigating any sort of contamination or making those connections, but I don't necessarily see the city wanting to go through and develop apartments. It's not our position, it's not our role. So, again, in terms of the grant funding, I mean, one, we have the URD in place for funding, and I think that's always been my question now that we're collecting these taxes, where do we want this money to actually go? And that might be something that comes with that master document.
Well, that is why we have this in the first place, because we were sitting here, we did have a couple of developers come to us in the very beginning, and we were like, how do we decide? How do we, so that is what this is for.
Gotcha.
Okay. Does anybody else have any thoughts on?
Well, I think, good point about, thinking about how to incorporate some of these visions into more of a planning kind of a document. To me, I view this just simply step one.
Yeah, it's awesome.
In terms of planning, and it gives us a starting point to start thinking about and envisioning. And now, and the next step is to carry on the conversation and discussion. And I don't know whether this concept fits into the idea of developing a PUD for this area, or actually develop some sort of a more comprehensive implementation plan that kind of takes in a lot of the concept ideas that you were talking about, Chelsea. But this, to me, this is just kind of a first step, and I think what we had talked about early on is we need to have a vision for what we want this area to look like in the next 10 to 20 years. And without that vision, you really have no way of guiding anything. Every developer just goes hodgepodge without any kind of connectivity or concept behind it. And so how it fits into our growth policy and stuff, and actually, that plan or some sort of implementation plan could then become part of the growth policy, just as some of our other documents have become.
Yeah.
So it all kind of fits together a little bit. But that's my thought anyway, it's just the first step.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that was, so I guess this was my question, is this is a great first step, and I'm really excited about, one, I was a part of a lot of these meetings and conversations, and I think they were very well done. And I like the information that came from it and the direction that it's going. So now that we have step one and a vision and a goal, what's step two? That's my question.
Yeah,
I mean, part of the reason we have this, we're having you all here tonight is to basically bring decision makers into this, because the URA, we're not a decision-making body. And I think, you know, taking it back a step, the overarching, I guess, vision behind this was what was laid out in the original creation of the URD and the documents that were presented for that. And that's what you guys were looking at too, is kind of a roadmap. And I agree, we do need to have a next step. But I think that visioning really, that's not just this group's input. I mean, we certainly want to provide the direction, but the planning and zoning and the city council need to be part of this, because otherwise we'll go nowhere. I think they did a great job conceptually, but the reality of it is, Chelsea brought it up, this is all going to be developer determined. I mean, it's whatever, but the developers want to do, but we have to give them a framework.
Correct.
That we want them to work with it.
Yeah.
There's some great ideas, and there's a lot of room here for tweaking those ideas to make it fit. You know, like 130 plus apartments. You know, our housing feasibility over the next few years, the study that Angela and group are working on right now, that'll help inform whether that's pie in the sky or that's realistic. And I don't think right now that kind of the thing we've all run into is we don't have enough information about our current housing needs.
Right. I feel like once we get a study done, it's already obsolete.
Yeah, what we're working off of is information from COVID time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I kind of have a question back to the planners that are online, is just to kind of tear off again what Chelsea was talking about in terms of how have other communities taken some of these next steps in terms of going more into an implementation phase or planning phase to make some of these concepts or modifications to the concepts more of a reality. I guess none of us are urban planners.
Jeremy is.
I'm an urban planner.
Jeremy's our contract planner, but we don't have a planner on staff.
Right.
That kind of help guide the planning board and city council in terms of how to sort of make these concepts or this idea or how the URD develops more of a reality, I guess.
I think that the main idea here is, if you want to have a developer be interested in this, it's going to have to be cost effective in the short run and the long run. So that's where the developers are going to be looking at it. Can we make some money on this for sure?
Yep.
So the developers are a huge part, probably the biggest part of this. The other concern that I've had just a bit is we worked really hard on having the retail center in Red Lodge as the downtown.
Yes.
Having any of it on the community entrance is a bit like, I don't like that, but there are other things that could be retail, such as maybe, a dog daycare type thing to the residents only. Things that are interested to the residents, not necessarily to the tourism that we see.
Yep.
So we have to be really careful in pushing retail down, on the community entrance.
I 100% agree. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Sandy, our conversation, what we've all talked about over the last several months is just that. And what we're, you know, the retail space is more for professional, you know, like offices, those types of things. You know, we have an eye doctor downtown in the middle of the street, which isn't a bad thing, but maybe that would be
It's
better.
Jeremy Battle.
Oh, we have a comment from Jeremy as well.
Yeah. Jeremy's raised his hand.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've taken that into consideration. Some of those retail space, you know, and we hadn't really talked about it with Blake, but you know, that could also be ground level parking underneath the buildings and not retail space. That actually frees up more green space.
Yeah. Okay, Jeremy.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Cool, thanks. So I just had, I guess, a question / comment. Do you think, and I guess I'd direct this kind of to the planning board, Jeff, maybe, do you think our existing urban renewal plan is the appropriate vehicle, you know, to start fleshing out some of this vision? You know, because that's where our goals live, you know, that's where the whole idea of this urban renewal area came into being. Do you think just revising that in light of, you know, everything we know now and have that be a iterative revision process, you know, is that a good next step? Is that a good vehicle for taking this forward? That's my question.
I think it could, yeah, I think it could be. For me, I would have to not, you know, sort of take another look at what the urban renewal area plan is, what kind of, and whether that could be sort of added on to, or whether that is actually the right appropriate document. It's not a very good answer to you, Jeremy, but I mean, we don't need a plethora of planning documents.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought. Like if we can revamp an existing thing to carry it, you know, maybe that's a good way to try anyway.
I think that we are looking at the community interest in the zoning right now, and I know we've made some kind of steps, for instance, having that big giant gas tank there, that while it's there, it's grandfathered in, but is that really what we want in our community interest type of thing? So we are looking really seriously at the community interest and what type of zoning we can implement down there that would encourage what we've seen tonight.
So I just have a quick question. You know, we have a lot of higher square footage type stores and things down there, like Rock Creek Lumber, we've got Rocky Mountain Tire, you know, we've got a lot of those types of things, we've got gas stations. You know, as we redevelop this, where in Red Lodge can those stores that need bigger square footage, like 15,000 square feet, where can they go?
It's one thing is we have considered that within the conversation, is that it's, and I think that is one thing that is still something that would be encouraged in that space, just more aesthetically pleasing and potentially multi-use and more functional. So again, it's not something that is intended to be get down, but at the same time, it's supposed to, yeah, create more of a structure.
There's not a lot of places where like a lumberyard can go.
Yeah.
Out there.
And that's also part of the conversation that is currently happening, is do we want a zone for that at all? And then let these folks, when they're done, they're done. That has been a part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think we have to zone for it somewhere, but that's just my opinion.
Yep, and
because we need lumberyards in Red Lodge.
Yep.
We do.
I use it frequently. So again, that is still
like
a big part of the conversation that's being had, and how to protect those businesses as well with that grandfathering, to make sure that, okay, just because, you know, Mead Lumber, again, Rock Creek sold to Mead, 10 years ago? Not even 10 years ago, but they sold recently, and again, we don't necessarily want it to be the situation where someone can't, or if it burns down, they can't rebuild or something along those lines. So again, that is still very much part of the conversation. But it's not the intention to get rid of it.
I am just cognizant that our people online are an hour ahead of us.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions for our
Apologies.
amazing consult, no, thank you. I'm just like, do we have any other specific questions or comments or thoughts for our, wonderful KSU TAP folks?
Benny, thank you. Oh my God.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you.
I just want to respond to, there was a question about kind of next steps. I do think, you know, your first step is really going to be internally getting, oh, and you don't have to show that, like, getting on the same page internally, you know, within your elected officials and internally within the city. And then moving forward and you know, adopting this plan either as part of the zoning code or not, I mean, not this plan, but, you know, looking at this and saying, is this what we want? And if so, does this fit with our zoning code, and making sure that all that stuff is ready to go. The other thing that I think, one of the things that we heard from, I don't even remember who really said this, but in our conversations, you know, it sounds like there's maybe been some development interest in this area in the past, but one of the barriers is the cost of installing infrastructure, which I believe is currently the responsibility of the developer. And, you know, figuring out if there's some way with the TIF revenue, with grant funding, if there's some way to match those resources together to remove that burden from the development community. Obviously, it would be great if they could pay for it, but with construction costs and labor costs and, you know, development risk, it's one of those things that can be very hard to find a developer who's willing to pay for. So to the extent that you guys are able to remove that as a question mark for and pave the way, literally and figuratively, for future development, I think that's going to be helpful. And I think there's going to be, you know, resources to minimize any financial outlay from the city, you know, aside from this TIF district funding, which is literally intended for infrastructure improvements. Yeah, those would be my two recommendations. Get on the same page and build some infrastructure.
Cool.
I think one last thing I was going to say, we're still talking about having the same presentation to the community at large, aren't we? Sometime in the spring?
Yep.
I will be in Montana in April for sure. So that's something we could discuss. Maggie and Blake will be out of the country, unfortunately. But I can do my best Blake impression. I'll borrow his glasses and
I'm sure you'll do great.
my best.
Yeah, you can
I would be happy to come back to Red Lodge.
Yeah, in April, you said? That would be great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unless you want to wait till May, then we could come. But that would be, you know, that's getting to be a little bit, you know, later in the calendar year.
Okay, well, I guess we can talk about that as a board. Yeah, okay. Great.
Yeah, you guys just let us know how you'd like to proceed and send us an email, and we're here as a resource. You know, we also, the original way we had planned on doing it was, you know, publishing it, you know, maybe not in full form, we'd have to discuss, but publishing the concept plans and as a survey and soliciting community feedback. So we could do that as an interim step between now and then, and that would be very easy.
That would be great. Put on what to do.
Excellent. Okay. This is all we had on our agenda, so.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
All right, well, it's great seeing you guys.
You all.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Hey.
Bye.
Merry Christmas. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's telling.
Like a happy meal.
I mean, I call for questions, but,
Yeah, that's true. You did.
all right,
Adjourned?
I guess we're adjourned.
We're adjourned.
Fabulous. Thank you.